Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. This yoga practice is for strengthening and stretching your hips. You may want a couple blocks, a blanket, and anything else you would like for your practice. And let's get started. So we're going to be strengthening our hips, our glutes, our outer hips, which also helps with balance. And then we'll stretch them. To begin, let's just come into a table pose and we'll just start to warm up a little bit. And coming into table, lengthen your spine. And then inhale, draw your heart forward, arch through your spine into cow. And then exhale, draw your belly in, look to your knees for cat. Continuing to flow through cat and cow. Breathe through your nose. And just notice how this feels. And then come back to neutral table. So we're going to get into a little warm-ups for our hips as well. So make sure your knees are comfortable here. If you're on a hard surface, you might want to open up a blanket. I'm going to do that as well. So you have a little extra cushion under your knees. If wrists bother you, you can always come into Mushti Mudra, thumbs forward being on your knuckles. You could put extra cushion under the heels of your hands, or you could come onto forearms on blocks. If you have access to 4 blocks, you might use 2 blocks under each forearm. That can also work. Just make sure it feels appropriate to you. So extend your right leg back. Stay on the ball of your right foot and just press through that right heel. Just getting a little stretch into that leg. And then lift the leg up about hip height. Press through your heel. Feel your leg activate, your glute activate. And if you want more of a challenge, you could always lift that left arm up and focus on your core strength as well. And then lower the left hand down, bend your right knee. You might point and flex through that right foot. Maybe rotate the ankle a little bit. And then keep the right knee hovering. You can relax the ankle and start to make circles with that right knee. Notice how your hip joint feels. And then reverse direction. And then lower that knee down. And then lift your right knee up, toes on the mat. Keep your knee bent just a little bit. Lift your knee up like a relief dog. Straighten that leg out, rebend it, and then lower the toes back down, keeping your knee hovering. Inhale, lift, exhale, straighten. Inhale, bend, exhale, lower. Once more, inhale, lift the knee up, straighten the leg, rebend it, and lower it down. Notice your hips even now. And then we'll do the other side. Straighten your left leg out, press through the heel, getting a stretch into the back of your leg, into the hamstrings, calf, and ankle. And then lift the leg up about hip height, engage your core, press through your heel, leg is active, glute is active. You can keep both hands down or reach your right hand forward or lift your right arm up. Coming into your variation of pointer dog. And then lower your right hand down and rebend your left knee. Lifting your left knee up, you might point and flex through that left foot or rotate your ankle. And then release your ankle. Move your knee in a circle. Notice how your hip joint feels. And then reverse direction. And then lower the knee down. Tuck your left toes and hover your left knee above your mat or blanket. And now for the relief dog action on this side. Inhale, lift your knee up slightly, straighten the leg. Inhale, bend. Exhale, lower. Hover the knee, touch the toes. Inhale, lift the knee. Exhale, straighten. Inhale, rebend the knee. Exhale, touch the toes. Once more. Inhale, lift. Exhale, straighten. Inhale, bend. Exhale, lower. Release. Notice those outer hips. Widen your knees. Toes can touch, or if you prefer, for a little deeper stretch into the hips, separate your feet slightly. Sit your hips back towards your heels or the space between your heels and come into your child's pose and rest. Support your head, maybe with your hands or a block, if your forehead doesn't quite make it to the mat easily. Breathe here. And on your next inhale, lift your head. Press yourself back up into table. Bring your knees back underneath you. And if you would like, just an option, some of you might prefer a down dog or a puppy pose. Puppy pose keeps your hips over your knees, reaching your arms out, maybe a block under your head. This is puppy pose. Drawing the belly in. Or tuck your toes and lift your hips up and back for downward facing dog. Lifting your hips up and back. Ground through your feet and hands. And notice how this feels. And then walk your feet towards your hands. Come up halfway, nice long spine. And then maybe bend your knees a little bit. Keep your spine long. And come into your Uttanasana, forward fold. Press into your feet, especially the balls of your feet. Notice those hamstrings. And then come up just halfway. Toe heel your feet out wide so your toes are pointing out. And bend your knees to come into a Malasana. So you can always keep your hands at your heart. If this is too uncomfortable, if heels don't come to your mat, you might fold your blanket and bring your heels onto the blanket so your heels are grounded. This is option one. Feet can turn out a little bit. Have your feet as wide as you need to come into this position. If it's still feeling like you can't get your hips low, you might also sit on one or two blocks and have your feet a little further forward. This might be your Malasana, your squat. So find your variation, maybe just with one block, if that works for you. Just be mindful, make sure your knees feel okay here. So again, option for the blocks if you need it, or you can just let your hips sink towards the earth. Hands might be at your heart center, or you might have your hands out in front of you for balance, maybe leaning a little more forward. Here in the Western world, we don't squat enough. This is so beneficial for our hips and our overall health. It's really a great pose. So take a few more breaths here. And then lift your hips. If you are on any blocks, set them aside. Hands in front of you. Start to lift your hips up. Toe heel your feet hip distance apart. Lengthen through your spine. Halfway lift. And another forward fold. Weight in the balls of your feet. Lengthen through your spine. A little bend in the knees is totally fine. Notice your breath. And then coming back up halfway. Pause here. And then bend your knees, bring your hands to your thighs. Coming into easy chair first. And then chair pose. Arms come out in front. I'm going to move my blanket aside. I don't need that anymore. So arms in front or at your heart. So when you're in chair pose, Utkatasana here, weight is in your heels. Keep your hips back as if you were going to sit in a chair and your spine long. Core is active. Try to look a little forward. Breathe here. And then slowly come all the way up. Maybe reach your arms out and up. And then bring your hands to your heart center. Press your hands together gently. If you ever feel lightheaded, press your hands more firmly and squeeze your glutes. And then pause. Release your hands. Come into Tadasana, mountain pose. Notice your breath, notice sensation. So we're going to do some standing poses. Some will be strengthening our outer hips. You can determine how much of a challenge you want this to be. So this pose is sometimes called a Shiva Squat, lots of variations, and it's sort of like a curtsy. Little girls sometimes used to curtsy. So it's similar to that. So we're going to step our right foot back, staying on the ball of the foot. Bend both knees and bring your hands to your heart. So we're here, bending the left knee on the ball of the right foot. Core is active, hands at the heart. So now for more challenge, come onto the tippy toes of that right foot. You can look down here slightly. Find a point maybe on the floor for your drishti, your focus. Notice your outer left hip. And then maybe, only maybe if you want more of a challenge, lift the right toes up off of the mat. You can always put them back down. And if you want more challenge, really point that right knee towards the mat and lift that right foot up. Notice the balance going on here. You need to lower the foot down. If you fall out, just come back, try again. And then exhale back to chair pose. Take another inhale here. Exhale completely. And then inhale, coming back up to Tadasana. Hands at your heart and pause. Notice sensation. Notice if one side feels a little different. Notice that outer left hip and leg. And now other side. So again, like a curtsy, take your left foot behind the right, staying on the ball of the foot or the toes, bend your right knee, engage your core, hands at your heart. So you might just stay here. And looking forward, this is what it looks like from this angle. So again, you determine the amount of challenge here. The more you bend the knee, your standing knee, the more you're going to feel this outer right hip. If you want more, come onto the tippy toes or lift that left foot up completely. Find your focus, your drishti. Notice the challenge here. Say hello to your TFL, your outer hip muscles right up there on the outer hip. A lot of other muscles are working as well. Whoops. The wall is so handy sometimes. You can determine how long you hold this. If you're lifting the foot up, feel free to put it down anytime. If you fall out, just come back, try again. And then exhale, chair pose. Chair pose sometimes feels like a resting pose after Shiva squat. Notice how that feels. And then on your next inhale, coming back up, back to Tadasana. Notice how you feel. Notice sensation. So now we're going to come down onto our mat and stretch those hips that we've been working. So come on down onto your mat. So next we're going to come down onto our back. If you need a blanket under your head, you can position that. And come on down onto your back. Knees are bent, feet flat on the mat. Constructive rest. Just pause here. So we started with standing on our left foot. So we were really working that outer left hip. So cross your left ankle over your right thigh first. And then lift your right knee up. And you can either put your right foot on top of a block. This might be enough of a stretch. Or you can lift the foot up off the block, maybe holding behind that leg. If you feel like your head is going back too much, you might need more of a blanket, a higher blanket under your head. And draw that right knee and left ankle towards your chest. Keep the left ankle active and just notice where you feel that stretch in your outer left hip. We'll be here for a few more breaths. You can relax the lower right leg if you would like, or you could keep that lower right foot active, whatever you prefer. And then thoughtfully release that right foot down and push the block aside, uncross that ankle, and take a moment and pause. Notice sensation. And then cross your right ankle over the left thigh. Lift your left foot up. Again, you might place a block under that left foot. That might be enough of a stretch. Or you can lift the left foot up, hold behind that left leg. You can relax the lower left leg. Keep your right ankle active, toes to the shin, and draw that left knee and right ankle towards your upper chest. Find your variation. And just notice if one side feels pretty tight and if the other side feels even tighter. Just notice the differences. And then thoughtfully release. And push the block aside. Uncross that ankle. And then draw your knees towards each armpit. Toes touch, stretching out the low back. And then take that block, lower your feet back down, place the block in between your heels and your hips, sort of pushing the block with your fingers until it gets close to in between your feet. And then use your feet to sort of hold the block and move the block with your feet a little further away from you. So your knees are still bent. And then bring your feet on top of the block and open your legs into a butterfly position. Now, if this doesn't feel good in your hip joints or anywhere else, you can always just remove your feet from the block and use a block on each side of your leg to support the knees or the thighs. So find what feels good to you. I like having my feet on a block because I think it feels better in the low back. So if you have any low back issues, this might be a version that you prefer. But if you need more support under your knees, you might do this variation with the feet on the mat and knees supported with the blocks like this. And the blocks can be turned at whatever height makes sense to you. So find your variation. I'm going to come back to the one with my feet on the block, and we'll be here for a few breaths. You might close your eyes and just notice your breath, inviting your hips to soften and release, appreciating the work you did in this brief practice today. Strengthening and stretching your hips. Just letting your breath slow down. And gently deepen. Take a few more breaths here. And then gently, maybe using your hands to help bring the knees back up together. Take your feet off any blocks and draw your knees in towards your chest. Give yourself a little hug. Maybe rocking side to side. And then roll over to one side or the other. And make your way back up to a seat. Pause for a moment. Notice how you feel. So with appreciation for your focus and your efforts, bring your hands together at your heart. Thank yourself for taking this time to focus on strengthening and stretching your hips. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have Have a beautiful rest of your day. Namaste. So remember, please subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, so you can stay alerted of all the new videos as they get posted. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the mat.